Hi Not Board Gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now in today's video we're going to be looking at a game which is currently on Kickstarter, and that game is Red Burnoose, Algeria 1857, designed by Roberta Taylor and Matt Shoemaker and published by Hit 'em with a Shoe Games. Fantastic name for a games company. And Algeria 1857 is a deck building war game. That's right, a deck building war game, and it's historically based as well. And it's set at a time when the French were invading Algeria. And the forces are combined and working together in terms of the Algerian forces to protect their villages and to stop the French taking over their villages. There's a lot of historical fact that came with the game. In fact, the guys at Hidden with a Shoe were very good to send me this kind of 6-7 page document all on the history there. And what's really good about this is that women play an integral part of it. In fact, the title of the character, the Red Burnoose, the title of the game, is based on a particular female character. Let me just pull her up. That's Fatma Nsouma, and she was very instrumental in kind of trying to fight off the French forces. And you will play the game using the deck building mechanics and moving pieces around on the map. As I say, it is a historically based war game against an Ultima deck, which is this Ultima deck here. And you are going to either win the game by getting through that entire Ultima deck. That's not easy. Or you're going to lose the game by losing villagers here. And once you've lost a couple of villagers, that's it. It is game over. So what is Red Burnoose, Algeria 1857? So a couple of things I want to say. Obviously this is a preview copy, so these aren't necessarily the final pieces for the game itself. However, the artwork is pretty good on this particular game. I kind of like it. And the various meeples that you've got, there are some of the French army meeples here, and also the various cubes that you got to kind of dictate who is what from your perspective and from their perspective as well. As I say, it is a deck building war game, and that's a little bit unique. Now, in terms of my history with wargaming, I don't really have a history with war games. They're not necessarily the type of game that I would play ordinarily. I think there are a number of reasons for that. Certainly kind of how traditional war games work doesn't really interest me necessarily. And playing historical people sometimes gives me a bit of an irk as well, because you have the whole kind of moral dilemma depending on which side you're on. The beauty about this is you are playing the indigenous population here, and you're fending off the invading French armies, and that's a really neat twist on this. So you're not playing the parts of the kind of potential conquerors here and the interlopers. You are actually defending the villages themselves. And as I say, there is an Ultima deck included with this for solo play and for cooperative, because it's 1 to 4 player cooperative game, and we're going to be purely looking at the solo game, which plays more or less the same as the co-op game with just a few minor tweaks. Like all good deck builders, you start with a starting hand of cards, and there are 12 cards that you will start with, and those cards are man, young man, woman, elderly man, elderly woman, young woman, youth, child, and artisan. And of course, those are your basic cards, and eventually you're going to get more cards because it is a deck building game. So you're going to use those cards in some instances to buy other cards from the list of 8 cards that you have here. And those are Mujahideen, Sharpshooter, Fig Orchard, Defences, Markets, Weapons, Tools, and Olive Orchard as well, which is really interesting. The other thing as well is that in a multiplayer game, or 2 player to 4 player, because it's 1 to 4 player cooperative, you will be allocated a certain number of villagers. In the solo game, you're going to get access to all 8 villagers. That's going to help you, but not as much as you think, because it becomes quite difficult to then manage the various resources on all the villagers. It's a great boon, but it also comes at the cost that you've then got to try and manage where you're placing your cards in the villages, and I'll explain how that works in a bit. The French forces are going to come onto the board at some point, and I'll explain how that works, but where they come onto the board, there are only 3 entry points, and you get these 3 tokens, and you'll shuffle those up and place them onto each of the 3 French armies, so you won't know exactly where they're going to come out onto the board. And the game will continue. You will play your cards, the French troops will start to get a little bit stronger, then they'll move out onto the board, and you're going to lose the game if you lose control of one village, and also if you then have to use your retreat token. Once you've done that, that's game over, and the game can come fairly quickly. So it becomes this really good kind of experience of building up your deck of cards, maximising your play, using cards to buy other cards, and keeping those French forces at bay through a combat system using a number of different coloured dice. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different coloured dice, depending on which units are being fought, and they are, as you can see here, I've got them in my hand, can't really show you, white, black, brown, yellow, red and blue. And you're going to use those die in combat, and we'll come on to combat, how combat works in a wee while. So let me show you the game board and how the game plays from a solo perspective. So here we can see the game set out in all its glory. I've got the board there. I have my French armies ready to come with their secret start locations. And you can see we've got Touro de Pass, Azazaga, and also at the top there we have Tizi Ouzou. Excuse me for my pronunciation there. I have my market cards all down the left hand side here. I've got the Ultima deck here, and I'll explain how that works. I've got my starting deck, and one of the first things I'm going to do, as well as all the villagers, one of the first things I'm going to do is choose a leader. So you take the leader cards and you shuffle and you draw 2 of them, put the rest away, and then we're going to choose one of these leaders. So we have Fatma Nsuma, and she says discard to place or move the Fatma token into any village not occupied by the French. When this card is placed in a village, add 1 reroll token to that player's pool. The Fatma token rolls as a Mujahidate. She may be used during ambushes. Start the game with 2 Mujahideen. Or discard, we've got Omar ul Mokhtar Nath Irathan. And it's a discard to place the Omar token into any village or return his marker from the board to your supply. Anytime Omar is placed in a village with no defences, build a defence. The Omar token rolls as a Mujahideen and may be used during ambushes. So I think I'm going to use Fatma, and it says here that I start the game with 2 Mujahideen. So what I would do is I would take 2 Mujahideen cards from the deck, 1, 2, and I would put them into my starting deck along with Fatma, and I shuffle that, and that creates my starting deck for the game then. And in a second we're going to draw 5 of those cards as my starting hand. Now down here is the Ultima deck. So what you do to start off is you're going to reveal a card per player. In solo game there's only 1 player, and that's going to tell you which troops you're going to add into the army spaces, because on these army spaces what it says is they will build up, and when they reach a certain level they will then deploy onto the board. So here deploy when 6 or more units are present. Once there are 6 units in there, you flip that over, you find out where they're going to move to, and you move them there. And then once you've done that, and that's on the board, you'll start filling up the next one, then they'll get deployed, and then finally the third one will get deployed there. So let's have a look at this. We got here, it says, and we're going to discard any text on the board. It says we're going to place 2 sappers and 1 carabinier in the French Ultima space troops. So the sappers are the orange token, so take one of those, cube, and the carabiniers are the, just bear with me, they are the blue token, so blue cube, so we'll take 2 of those. And we'll put those in there. So you can see they've already built up 3 in there. Then the next thing to get the Ultima ready is we're going to just flip over 2 Ultima cards and put them on the board. So there we go. If there are no Ultima cards available, then you would move 2 into the board. And you can see here, this kind of gives you, from the solo perspective, a little bit on kind of planning on what comes next. Because you're not playing co-op, then of course you can't play off each other. So we're more or less ready now to start. I'm just going to shuffle this deck once more and draw 5 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I have my starting hands of cards to start the first round. And in every round you're going to take 3 actions. So let's take a look at these cards themselves, because these cards have a couple of purposes. First of all, down at the bottom here, we have the purchase power of these cards. If you just forget that N symbol, here it tells me that to purchase this, I need to have 4 influence, 4 military power, and 1 food. Of course, when I get this card, I can also place 2 Mujahideen on the board, so I should have done that already. I'll do that in a second. So that's how you purchase the card from the market, and I'll explain how that works because that comes at the end of your turn. And here is the kind of powers, the purchasing resources that the card gives you. So the Mujahideen would give me 2 influence on this card and 4 military power. And you can either use the cards to kind of move them around on the board, or you can use them after you've taken your 3 goes to then buy additional cards from the market there. So yeah, that's how you do it. And also it says here, there's some text on this, and it says, on the Mujahideen, discard with a weapon card to ambush any French units on a path leading to the village you control. The path may be interrupted by stops, but not by other players' villages. So that is the action you can take with it, and that's one of the 3 actions you can take, which is an ambush. So when it comes to the actions, you can take, as I say, 3 actions. And those actions are, you can reserve. So you can place a card into a village, and when you place a card into a village, it can give you additional bonuses. And you can also retrieve them from there as well, which we'll come to in a second. Yeah. So you can play a card into a village, effectively holding it in there. Or you can retrieve all your cards from any one of your villages, and that's an action you can take. By retrieving those cards, if you stored them under these villages and got the bonus there, once you've taken them back into your hand, you can then play them instantly. So that means that if you've got enough cards stored under the villages and you built them up nicely, you may start the game with, or your round, with only 5 cards. But if you use that action to then withdraw those cards from the villagers, that means that you can end up with maybe 10 cards in here, basically, and that gives you more options, not only for the actions that you want to take, but also in terms of purchasing power from the market, and that's a really neat mechanic. The next thing you can do as an action is to ambush, and ambushing is where you would discard a Mujahideen or sharpshooter card along with a weapons card to ambush any French units on a path leading to a village you control, and we'll come on to how combat works in a second. Finally, you can mobilise. And by mobilising, you can move any number of Mujahideen and sharpshooters from one of your villages to another. But no other type of unit, either leaders or Mujahideen, may be mobilised. There are certain cards that allow you to not just move from village to village, but move all over the board. And that's a particular power on the card itself. So here we have the Ottoman. When it comes to the French turn, what's going to happen is if there is an army type on here, so we can see these cards, that has the cavalry, that has the carabiniers on there, you would choose the rightmost card that has an army type. There are a couple of cards in there which don't have army types, so you'll always try and choose the card that has an army type. If at any point there aren't any army cards there, you're going to put 2 cards in there. So you've got a little bit of forward planning. So in this bit, for the French's turn, I would use this. That would then move that there, I'd flip another card over, and that would go there. But when you reveal a card from there, each card has the type of army unit you're going to deploy. So here, on my next turn, I would deploy 4 carabiniers into here. That would give me 6 for that, which would put that on the map, but also put me 1 in there as well as I'm starting to build up. And you can see on here that it would say that deploys when there's 6. It also says retreat if 2 or fewer units are remaining, and that's when you come into combat with them. You will do combat until either you're defeated or they get down to a retreat number. Once they're a retreat, they move away. So you've effectively won that combat system there. There are a number of things. It's a dice-heavy game, and throughout the game, you're going to get a number of reroll tokens as well. And these rerolls really, really help. With it being a dice-based game, what happens is, of course, there's an element of luck in there, and you're going to need those reroll tokens. You're going to build them up and use them strategically throughout the game, but it is very difficult. It is a challenging game to play, and you're absolutely going to need those reroll tokens. So as I mentioned, when I took the 2 Mujahideen cards into my deck, I should have put a couple of Mujahideen cubes out on the board. Because of the symbol that's on there. There's a couple of cards that will have this symbol on there, Mujahideen and also the sharpshooter as well, and that's this symbol here, which means that you add them to the board. So I've got my 2 white cubes, and I don't know where these French armies are going to come out at the moment, so I potentially want to put them in villages, which are going to help me. So let's put 1 in Akbil, and let's put 1 in Afyeni, and we'll see what happens there. Okay, so now we come to playing the game. I have 5 cards, I have 3 actions to take, and then I get to take a market phase, and then what happens is the autumn is going to take their turn. Also, a couple of things I forgot to mention on the villagers' powers as well is if you allotted villagers as on the 2-player plus game, obviously you get the powers that are on there. As a solo player, you get all the additional powers on there. So in Ath Usaif, I begin the game with 1 market card, so I'll put that into my deck. In Athiene, I begin the game with 3 reroll tokens, and that's really, really useful, so we'll take those as well, 1, 2, 3 of those. In Mekla, I get another market card into my deck. And here we go. Oh, there we go. In Irgen, I get another 3 reroll tokens. That gives me 6 reroll tokens as a solo player to start off with. And here in Sumer, I begin the game with 1 fig orchard as well. So you can see that my potential deck has got significantly bigger. Now I'm going to shuffle this again because I've added these cards to the deck as well. So let's just do that and draw 5 new cards out of there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll see what cards we've got. I have a youth here. That gives me 0 influence, but when placed in a village, I can draw 3 cards, keep 1 and discard the other. So sometimes you get additional bonuses for placing cards in villages, and that's why you would do that there. I've got the leader herself, so I can discard to place or move the Fatima token into any village not occupied by the French. So when it's placed in a village, I can add 1 reroll token to my pool, and the Fatima token rolls as a Mujahidate. Each player gets 2 Mujahidate. Fig Orchard is worth 2 food, and I have to buy it for 7 influence there. However, that you're going to need food. Here we go, we've got man, and that's 2 influence and 2 military power, what it's worth. And I can discard to move 1 sharpshooter from your territory to any other village, and that's good. So as I say, you can mobilise and move them between the villages that you own, but as the man allows you to put them literally in any village on the board. If you move a sharpshooter into another player's village, gain any 1 card from the display that does not have a deploy icon on there. I've got another man card, which is exactly the same, and another youth card, and that's it. So they're my 5 cards I have there. I have 2 man, 1 youth, a fig orchard, and I've got Fatma and Suma. So now I've got to decide what's the best course of action for my 3 goes. So looking at the board, the first French army is already at 3 strength. They have their 2 carabiniers and 1 sapper in there. So let's have a look at what I can do. Well, first of all, let's start with Fatma. And yes, she's got some fairly hefty purchase options there, but it does say here discard to place or move the Fatma token into any village not occupied by the French. I could put her into a village itself, under one of these villages here, and that would give me a reroll token, but in reality I've got 6 reroll tokens. I don't need that, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to discard Fatma. We're going to take her meeple, and there we go, we've got the Red Burnoose red meeple there for Fatma, so we'll discard that card and we'll place her in a village not controlled by the French. Now I've got a couple of Mujahideen in there already, covering 2 of them, or 2 potential routes for them. So I'm going to place Fatma over in here in Ifahunan. So that's go number 1. Okay, go number 2. Let's have a look what I can do. Yeah, so I've got 2 man, a fig orchard and a youth. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this youth and place him in a village. It says when placed in a village, draw 3 cards, keep 1 and discard the other. So I think, yeah, let's have a look. Doesn't really matter where I'm going to put them at this stage, so I'm going to put that youth in Ifahunan there, and I can draw 3 cards out here, which is good. So we'll draw 3 more cards, 1, 2, 3, and we can have a look at those. I've got 2 markets. Discard this card to spend food, weapons and tools interchangeably this round, and I've also got a young woman, which gains me a reroll. So I think what I'm going to do is, yeah, that goes in my discard pile there, the 2 I'm not using. I'm going to keep the young woman, add that to my hand, and I can play her instantly now for my 3rd go. So I place Fatima, discarded her card, I put the youth in there, and now I'm going to take the young woman and I'm going to place her in a village. Let's put her under there. And it says I gain a reroll token, and that's good. I've now got 7 reroll tokens, which is really good. So that's my 3 goes done now. So what I can now do is use the icons here to purchase cards from the marketplace. So if we look at the cards I've got left, I have 2 food, I have 2 military power and 2 influence, and 2 military power and 2 influence. That gives me a total of 4 military power, 4 influence and 2 food as well. And I've had a look through the market, and the one thing I can buy that's really good actually is this Mujahideen. As you can see, it needs 4 influence, 4 military power and at least 1 food. So I'm going to discard those cards and go back into my discard pile, and I'm going to buy this Mujahideen. When you buy a card and acquire a card, it goes back into your discard pile, but as we know, the Mujahideen has also got this deployment icon at the bottom, and that means I get to put another cube, white cube, on the board somewhere. So I'm already starting to strengthen up my defences, and I think what I'm going to do, we've got Mujahideen and Fatma over there in the green villages, we've got one over there, but I've got nobody in the brown villages. So let's put this Mujahideen up at this potential first area where they go. And that's it. That's the end of my round. We're now going to move into the Automa's turn. So as I mentioned, for the Automa, you have these 2 cards here, and what you're going to do is you're going to take the rightmost card that has an army symbol on it, and here we have, this one has got the cavalry symbol on there. So for this, we're going to take this particular card, slide that one up, and the first thing we're going to do is add 2 cavalry into their troops there. So cavalry are brown, and we'll look at that. They're already at 4 on that. And it's also, some of the cards have got text on the bottom here. And this says each player must destroy 1 orchard is possible. That's where you look through your kind of your deck and your discard pile to see if you've got any orchard cards. Now, I have Fig Orchard, but not an actual orchard card. Which is a, I have a Fig Orchard, not an olive orchard. So let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, there we go. There's nothing in my deck there, so we'll look through the discard pile and we'll see what's in there. And it says, Fig Orchard, I've got a Fig Orchard card. It says destroy that card, that means it's removed from the game and that's no longer viable for us. So, you'll also notice these little symbols at the top. We've got triangles and we've got circles as well. And that's for the French movement. You see, as they move through the map, you can see that you've got these symbols on here, which are a circle there and a triangle there. When they come to a fork in the road, you're going to use that symbol to determine where they go through on their travels through there. So that adds an element of randomness into it. So that's discarded. We move that from there, and we move that card over there, and I can see what's going to happen next. Now, had they got another 3 into there, so they've now got 2 carabiniers, 1 sapper, and 3 cavalry. That would have then, because there is 6 on there, that would mean they would deploy. And what would happen there is we would take this token and have a look at where they're going to go. And that is Tizi Ouzou, which is right at the top of the board. So I'll just move the camera up there. And what you would do, flick that over, and I would move my pawn up to there. And those are the troops that they have for that particular army. So when it gets to a combat situation and they enter a village where I'm at, I'm going to measure those troops against the troops I've got there and roll the dice pool. So that is now complete for that army. They are now deployed and on the board up at Tizi Ouzou. I now know that these 2 armies are either going to come out of Terreur de Pass or Azazaga, so I can maybe start thinking about how I need to defend those. When that gets to 8, that will then deploy 8 various troops in there. That will then deploy that particular army onto the board. And you can see that's how it builds up. It's a really effective system of kind of using your deck of cards to try and get better cards into your hand, to try and combat what you've got coming from the Automa deck. You're going to have a sense of where these guys are going to go, the French are going to go and try and invade the villages, but it's not going to be totally known because there are these many different forks in the road. What happens when we get to a combat situation? So here we have a simulated combat here, because I've just kind of put some troops in here just to show you how combat works. And it's going to take place in Ath Usaif. And what this says here on the village card for Ath Usaif is that I gain 1 reroll token at the beginning of each combat. So that means I've now got 8 reroll tokens that I can use. And they're going to come in particularly useful, but you know, they're kind of difficult to come by in the game, and you want to use them kind of strategically. So the first thing that happens in combat is if there's any French artillery in the combat, then they're going to roll first. And we have 1 artillery, 2 cavalry, and 2 carabiniers there. For me, I got 2 sharpshooters and 2 mujahideen there defending the village. So the French artillery is going to roll first, and it tells you here on this handy little card basically what die colour you need. So therefore it's a black die for artillery, and what will happen if I roll with particular numbers. As you can see on 5 and 6, if I rolled a 5, I'd get 1 hit against my troops. If I rolled a 6, there would be 2 hits. So we roll the French artillery first, and it's a 4. That means it's a miss. They haven't done anything, so that's good. I've managed to survive the first wave of combat. We now move into alternating combat between the Berber forces, which is the villagers, and the French forces. You can use the reroll tokens to force the French to reroll. So the next stage of the matter is that the sharpshooters are going to roll first, and I have 2 sharpshooters, therefore I'm going to roll 2 die. And as we can see here, it says on this card for the yellow die, if I roll anything from a 3 upwards, my sharpshooters are going to they're going to kill at least one of the French forces. So let's roll my 2 dice. And we got a 2 and a 2, which is below it there. So I can actually discard 2 reroll tokens, which is these reroll tokens here. Discard those and re-roll those dice. So let's see what happens now. I've got a 3 and a 5. That means I get to remove 2 of the French forces. And you do that in the order that they're stated in this card. So it says cavalry, carabiniers, and artillery, and then sappers, basically. So if you look at cavalry, and there are 2 cavalry on there, I've got 2 hits. I get to remove 2 of their forces. Now, back down here on the French army, on this first army, it says, retreat if 2 or fewer units are remaining. There aren't 2 or fewer units, so there are still 3 units there. So now what's going to happen is we're now going to take alternating turns between myself and the French. The Berbers roll first, then the French, and we'll see who's left at the end. So if I'm rolling again now, we now have 2 mujahideen that are going to roll. So that's 2 white dice that we got. 1 second, here we go. And if we look on there, again, back on this combat card, it says if I roll a 4, a 5 or a 6, I will then score hits against them. So let's have a look what we got there. Oh, we've got 2 2s again. So I'm going to discard another 2. No, I'll just discard 1 and see what happens. So we're going to discard another 1 reroll token, and I've got a 5. What that means is I would have then defeated the French there, because I've knocked them down to 2, and it said retreat if 2 or fewer units are remaining. But say I hadn't done that, the French would then next go in our order. So next up would be, we've got the cavalry, it's the carabiniers that are going to roll for the French, and they've got 2 carabiniers. So we're going to roll 2 blue dice, and as we can see on this, it says a 4, a 5 or a 6 gives them a hit. So let's see what they do. They've got a 2 and a 5. I could use a reroll token to make them re-roll that, but I'm going to keep the reroll tokens there. So if we look in order here, the first thing that they do is remove a mujahideen. They've got 1 hit, so one of my mujahideen is gone. Then it would be back to my turn, and I would then, if I had any forces left, I would then roll. I don't have any forces left. The French are out of forces there. So that is kind of the first wave of combat done. But combat kind of continues until the French army is reduced to below 2 or below the retreat value. We know that's 2 for there. Or the Berbers, I can retreat if the retreat token has not yet been used by any Berber player, and if there are no children or youths present in the village, and the retreat token is this here. So I get to run away. But bear in mind, if I lose a village and I've played the retreat token, that's it, that's game over for me. I can do that and place a retreat marker in the abandoned village. And that's what you do. You go back and forth until you're either defeated or somebody is retreating. And for the French to retreat, they would move the army back to its army space on the board. So they go back to this space again on the board. And that's really good because it gives you this kind of breath of fresh air and a little bit of breathing space while you're still combating the other armies on the board. And that's a pretty quick rundown of how Red Burnoose, Algeria, 1857 works. Of course, there are lots of nuances here, and your tactical and strategical moves make a huge difference to how you play the game. Making sure that you've got your troops in exactly the right place, trying to anticipate where those French armies are going to move is absolutely key. Sparingly using your reroll tokens is wonderfully dangerous, because you may use them to win a particular battle, but it doesn't mean you're going to win the war. Choosing which cards you use to either place in the village or use the powers on them, and which cards you need to keep to buy the various cards in the market is absolutely key as well, because there are some really powerful cards in here which give you not only additional abilities to get more troops on the board in the case of mujahideen and sharpshooters, but also to potentially get stronger cards from there which you can then beef up your deck with. But like all deck builders, the more cards that you have can sometimes be a hindrance as you're cycling through your deck 5 cards at a time, trying to get to the card that you know is in there. That's where putting them in the villages becomes really, really, really useful, because by doing that, you're effectively taking them out of your deck, you're storing them, and then you can pull them back out at any point to then beef up your deck if you then want to buy cards from the market. And that's a beautiful part of this game. The multi-function cards that you have, either to use their powers to place them in a village or to keep them back to buy cards from the market, is a stroke of masterpiece. It's really, really good. The game may look like it's initially quite confusing, but it's relatively straightforward to play. Everything kind of flows nicely, and you're going to get through a game in around about 60 to 80 minutes as a solo gamer. But the game is not easy to beat. You have these ever-increasing threats that are on the board, and you are trying your hardest to maximise your deck, to maximise your card play, to buy cards from these defences, from the market, to try and beef up your hand so that you know that when it comes to a particular confrontation, you've got the best players on the board. How the Ultima works in the solo game, as I say, once you're through the Ultima deck, that's it, you've won the game. And I've played the game half a dozen times now. I've never made it through that deck. I get to places in the game where I think I'm going to win, and then all of a sudden something comes out on here, and quite frankly, my life is made sheer hell. It's a very challenging game. The Ultima plays very, very smoothly. There's no real upkeep. I think, some people may be dissuaded by the dice play that's involved. Dice play will always have an element of randomness in there. It is mitigable in some degree by the forces that you've got in place and by the number of reroll tokens that you've got, but there will also be that element of the unknown with these with the dice play. The combat works nice and smooth. You know which die you're going to roll for which particular armies. You can do it in a set order, and then you're going to either defeat them, or they're going to retreat, or you're going to retreat or lose the village. And say if you lose a village and you use your retreat token, that's it. That's game over as well. You don't get many chances to survive in this game, so kind of getting everything right early on is absolutely key. Who will this game appeal to? And I think that is kind of an interesting question. Because, as I say, I'm not a wargamer. You can count on one hand the number of war games that I've actually played, but I've enjoyed playing this, and I think the fact that it is based in historical facts, and the fact I'm working for or playing the side of the villagers rather than the kind of potential conquerors of those villages, or the interlopers, if you like, makes it feel more real to me. There's still kind of that element of disappointment when you haven't managed to stave off the French forces, and you think, oh God, no, I've let the villagers kind of down on this, and that's not great. And a really interesting thing, by the way, is if they conquer a particular village, if the French conquer a village, any mujahideen left in there go and fight for the French, which is just a fantastic way that you adds another level of extra kind of care that you have to take when you're doing these combat phases. You don't want your mujahideen going over there and fighting for the French. Now, as I mentioned, the deck building element, it's pretty good. You have almost like a Dune type. If you play Dune Imperium, then you know that any cards that you've got left in Dune Imperium you can use to buy cards from the market. That's exactly the same here. So that works. It doesn't do anything kind of extraordinary in terms of deck building. You get that deck building feel for it, and I think had it just been a purely deck building game, it may not have held enough interest. However, by combining it with the board, by combining it with the Automa and the meeples moving out on the board and the cubes moving out on the board, you've got these really, really nice dynamics involved, and there's a lot of care and attention gone not only into the game and how the game plays and how smooth it plays, but also into the history that came with it. As I say, they sent through, and I don't know whether it's going to come through in the retail version, but they sent through a hefty kind of history tome in there, so you get to fully understand why you're doing this. So to answer the question of who this is for, if you're looking for an entry level into wargaming, this could well be the way forward for you. I think that it gives you some overarching feel of how war games work, how you're trying to manipulate your troops and your armies and your various your mujahideen and your sharpshooters to the best particular places to stop the kind of ongoing and conquering forces coming to get you. So it gives you that lovely element. If you are looking for an intro into wargaming, then this is it. And also, if you like deck builders, you're going to get some pleasure out of building your deck. I think there could be more variety in there, in that deck. I think that's the only thing. I'd like to see some potential expansions for this which give you more options in terms of what's available from the market. Because I think it can just feel, after you play the game a few times, you kind of know what the market is and you can build up your strategies. So maybe, having some extra layers of choices in the market would be a good thing for them. Look, I've enjoyed that time with Red Burnoose. I didn't know when I received it if it was going to be my type of game, and it took me a while to get my head around the rules as they were written. I know they've been revised since this, and Matt from Hidden with a Shoemaker sent me an email, and I also discussed with Michael Kelly over at One Stop Co-op Shop. By the way, if you want to see a playthrough, go and watch the One Stop Co-op Shop video playthrough. That gives you a more in-depth view on it. But I have genuinely enjoyed my time with it. It's a game I've had a pleasure of getting back to the table. I've not felt worn out and kind of overused by the game at all. Now, multiple plays, you're not going to want to play this game week in, week out, but it's certainly a game that if you're looking for an hour's play, which doesn't take a lot of setup, it's going to provide you with a good challenge where you've got threat management, you've got moves, forces moving on you, you're manipulating your armies to try and put them in the best place, you've got the market dynamics, and you're building your deck up. It's a really good experience. I've kind of really enjoyed my time with it. So, it's available now on Kickstarter. So the campaign is live on Kickstarter. Check the link in the comments below. That's Red Burnoose, Algeria, 1857, designed by Roberta Taylor and Matt Shoemaker, and published by Hit 'em with a Shoe. If you like deck builders, if you like war games, if you think the interaction between a deck building mechanism and a war game is for you, then go and check out the link and back the game on Kickstarter now. Thank you very much for joining me on this journey through Red Burnoose, Algeria 1857. My name's Mark. This is Not Board Gaming. Don't forget you can always follow us on Facebook, on Twitter. Don't forget to, on Instagram as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos, and there are nearly 100 on the channel so far. And remember, one final thing. If you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time, bye-bye.